sound, and vibration be a key to optimizing your health? In this episode, I chat with Raphael about the innovative RoXiva light and how this stroboscopic light therapy technology helps you break free from autopilot living, reprogram subconscious patterns, and tap into brain states that enhance creativity, sleep, performance, mood, learning, skill development, and even rapid healing. A device that's pioneering neuro light therapy. And if you ask me, something I expect you'll see in all the major wellness centers, wellness clinics, biohacking centers, and even forward thinking group classes. In this episode, you'll learn how light, sound, and vibration can mimic psychedelic experiences, heal traumas, and help you move past mental loops keeping you stuck. In this episode, we explore how to break out of automatic thought loops, how to restore balance to the brain using technologies like neurofeedback and meditation and audiovisual entrainment, using psychedelics to catalyze joy, but that comes with drawbacks, and how you can capitalize on some of those same states without any substances. The dark side of a philosophy called stoicism, the way suppressing emotions manifests as physical pain or illness, how the visual system impacts the mind, and why it more effectively entrains the brain to desired patterns than other technologies and tools. And my personal favorite, how to stack brainwave entrainment technologies for the greatest possible outcome. Joining us today is Raffaele Gianfrancesco. He's a polymath with expertise in Wall Street finance, business development, and the beauty industry. As you're about to hear, he has a lifelong fascination with the human brain. After exploring philosophy and studying energy medicine, he transformed insights from his trauma-filled childhood into personal healing. Now he shares his passion for brainwave technologies, particularly through the RoXiva light. You can find the show notes for this episode at mindbodypeak.com/186. There, I will put the references to the studies that we mentioned throughout the episode, as well as my full breakdown and review of the RoXiva lamp, along with the ways I personally integrate RoXiva into my routine. I'll also include some of the similar devices I've encountered if you want to give those a shot. Again, the show notes are at mindbodypeak.com/186. All right, sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode with Raphael. Well, from previous conversations, I know just the place to start with you.
Nice.
And that is a quote from you, and that is, "Our brain is not our friend." Can you fill in some context behind that quote, why you said it, and what exactly you mean by it?
Yes, our brain, another way of saying it is our brain is our frenemy. And yeah, so why would I say something like that? Well, I mean, every one of us has instances in their life where they think to themselves, why did I do that? Why did I say that? Why can't I do this? What prevents me from moving forward? Why am I stuck? And so all of these statements indicate an inability to navigate or pilot this device that's between our ears. You know, we've got this navigation system that half the time is on autopilot, and we try and can't get it to listen to our commands. We can't take the wheel into our hands as readily as we'd like to.
And I think that number is at least half the time it's on autopilot, if not more than half the time.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely.
So today we're going to be talking about how specifically light and audio and frequencies impact the brain and how they can shift our mental state. How did you get involved in this whole world?
So for me, it was really a journey through a process of healing. Had a very traumatic childhood and really just lived a life of extreme success and then crashing failures in repeating cycles. And I always wondered, like, why can't I hold on to success or good things? Like, what's wrong with me? I would strive, 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 and no matter what I would try to do, I would become successful. But then I would kind of plateau and then drop off and start doing all these self-defeating behaviors. I would miss appointments. I would just become careless. My addiction to fun would kick in and I'd start just doing stuff that wasn't work related. And so, all of that like led me to believe something's up. Like my wiring isn't quite right. And when I started really digging into that, I realized that I have a very strong trauma response. I have a very strong fight or flight built in, baked into my brain. And I knew I needed to do something about that. So I started doing meditation and Joe Dispenza and energy medicine school and Reiki and just everything. And, some things helped a little bit, some things helped not at all. But really, effectively, what I learned in the big picture was that I needed to take control of my processes and what goes on in my subconscious mind. So I tried medication that didn't really work, and one day I discovered neurofeedback, which is a process of using feedback that's delivered a variety of ways, visually, auditorially. And it's basically sensors on your scalp that read your brainwave patterns and then alert you when you are shifting gears too much, like kind of like when you're driving and you're like overdoing the clutch and the brake and the gas pedal and all of that. So that helped some, but what I realized was that it only helped me kind of regulate, and it didn't help me in another area which I had realized I was lacking in, and that is in my sense of joy, my sense of happiness. And what I learned through further study is that when you have a trauma brain, you basically limit your responses to a very narrow channel, and so that you don't get really upset, all right? But you never ever get really happy either. And so only by doing psychedelics did I realize that joy was a thing, that like real, true connection, bliss, serenity, and joy were a possible thing. And so I basically did a lot of psychedelics for a while. But you can't do that. You have to function in the world and you have to be able to, and who's got all day to be on mushrooms, right? So I ended up going on a retreat and I met somebody that had a device that it's a brainwave entrainment device that uses stroboscopic light. And I did a session on it and I was just blown away. I went right back to that place that I go to when I do psychedelics. And I was like, whoa, this is something. And now this is
Hmm.
this is 2021. And so I found out about this company and I went and I met them and got on a Zoom call, and they're based in England, and got myself one of these devices and just started working with it and fell in love.
A lot to explore there. We'll start off.
Yeah.
I'm curious if there were any patterns or signals that let you identify in the beginning that you would very easily get into fight or flight. Like, how did you go about figuring out this is an area that you should even explore to begin with?
Well, I mean, for me, it's being really tuned in and really sensitive, because when you've got a trauma background, you're always scanning for threats. So when you have a very hair trigger for getting offended, when you have a very low tolerance for getting upset or disjointed over something, and then when something happens and you just can't let go of it, that those are all things that tell you that something's not quite right. There's the image of the two ducks or swans that come across each other in a pond, and one gets too close to the other and they get into it and they're like really going at it, and then they're done and they walk away and they just flap their wings a lot for about 30 seconds and then they're done. It's like it never happened. And we don't do that as humans. We ruminate. And, we've got this thing in our head called the HPA axis, which is the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. And that's what controls all of the chemicals that give us our moods and our states. And when our amygdala gets triggered, and that's the part of our brain that is fear or threat, when that gets triggered, the HPA axis jumps in and starts just pumping adrenaline and fight or flight chemicals into our body so that we're just ready to go.
Yeah. There's that side. So it sounds like you knew very quickly that you had a traumatic experience and that was coloring your view of yourself and of the world and everything. There's also the stoic approach where it's nothing affects me. I am the arbiter of my own reality. Like I can watch the people around me die and it's my choice if I feel sad. There's like the two extremes. And I think that like there's now a move towards the stoic perspective of being the better version because you're in control and then you get to decide how much happiness and fulfillment you're experiencing and all that stuff. But I also see that as another form of escapism because you're supposed to be affected by the things that are going on around you. And whether you're consciously telling yourself you're not, your subconscious is still affected.
Yeah, Carl Jung really did a tremendous amount of work around archetypes and shadow that, all around this. And, what you don't transform, you transmit. It's very simple. If we don't process and integrate our shadow and the negative experiences that we have in a proper way, we're just going to bury them. And that's why a lot of these stoic types end up with heart disease because they just grieve themselves to death for just the losses that they never allowed themselves to feel. Because every one of these situations is a loss. It's something to be grieved. And when you do that properly, you can move on and you can have access to the joy in your life.
Yeah, that reminds me of the work of Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, where the body keeps the score.
I'll bet. Yeah, Bessel van der Kolk.
And where if you don't actually like let the energy move through you in some way, then it becomes lodged somewhere in your nervous system.
Yes. I just saw a study the other day that proves now that individual cells have a memory function, that they can remember stimuli and store for future need an event so that they can move away from danger. And, I think we were talking about this another day about plants. Plants can be motile. They can turn towards the sun. They can move towards water. So those are cells without a brain, and yet they're doing these things. So, yeah.
Okay. And so then you found this light. One thing I heard you mention earlier too is that you were doing behaviors and certain things that weren't serving you. And I also, to tie that into the discussion of the subconscious, I think it wasn't serving your conscious mind and what you wanted logically, but the subconscious part of you, which is infinitely more powerful than the conscious mind, in some way wanted that, which is why there is the tug-of-war and the subconscious ended up winning and you repeated the same behaviors.
Yes, absolutely. Because what's happening when that's going on is that you've got a tape running in your head. There's basically a constantly repeating, ever, always there voice. And that actually lives in a place called the default mode network, which is the combination of the temporal, parietal, and frontal lobes of the brain. They get together and form our sense of self, that kind of voice in our head. And we don't often hear that voice because it's prelingual, it's pre-language. A lot of our conditioning goes in before we ever know how to speak. And so if you're a baby and you grab for something and your hand gets slapped, the message that goes in is you can't have the things you want. And if you attempt to get them, bad things will happen to you. Okay. So you get that kind of wiring, that kind of rut in the brain. That's the default. That's the go-to. And, we all have the ability to, control our thoughts. And it brings up the whole concept of free will. And, do we really have free will, which is a whole other podcast. But when you think about it, you can make a choice sometimes in a moment to make another choice and do something different. But if we're stressed, if we're upset, then that ability gets taken away. It gets reduced. If we're tired, if we're in a compromised situation, if our immune system is down. So yes, it is possible to override those patterns if we're conscious and completely there. But as we mentioned earlier in the call, most of the time we're just not.
Yeah. So out of all of different ways of rebalancing the body, the mind, the nervous system, you gravitated towards after trying a bunch of different things, the device that seemed to combine all of these. Let's explore that now.
So when I was trained in neurofeedback, brainwave entrainment was considered kind of a joke. Like it was like binaural beats, it's a joke. The brain gets used to them and you don't really get benefit from them after a while. And, but it was proven by Dr. Robert Monroe, though, that the Monroe Institute, I think you might be familiar with that, but Dr. Robert Monroe proved that you could, with sound, impact the consciousness and send people on journeys. So right there was a body of work that proved that it was possible. But what happened is as with any technology, there was improvement and there was constant and never-ending investigation and development. And what they learned is that we could use multiple stimuli to get us into fully immersive states where we kind of lose our sense of self in a good way. And technology that I use, the RoXiva, is sound, light, and vibration, so that we're really hitting 3 of the 5 major senses right there. And we can actually add the other 2 by aromatherapy. If you just kind of put a dab of something under your nose as an anchor, you can actually bring those in as well, so that you can really create some lasting change. So how does the lasting change happen? Well, in neurofeedback, we learned that if you reward a certain response in the brain will continue to produce that response. And then if you inhibit that response at whatever particular area, because there are 20 spots on the brain where they put the sensors for the training, then the brain will produce less of that frequency in that area. But what ended up happening is that that could create situations like adverse reactions or side effects. And so the neurofeedback was awesome for like certain things, but the entrainment turned out to be even better for showing the brain how to get places that it couldn't go on its own. So when I mentioned earlier about the bliss and the joy response, okay, well, I mean, the first time I really experienced true bliss was when I did Bufo, which is 5-MeO-DMT, known as the toad. But then when I did the RoXiva afterwards, I actually went back to that same place. It reactivated that pathway for me. And what that told me was, no, it's not just that we're driving the brain to do something and the brain won't be able to do it on its own. But what's happening is when we drive the brain to do something, the brain, being a learning organism, says, all right, well, we're here. How did we get here? And it stores that. And if you anchor what you're trying to install using either tapping or touching or a scent, then you can install that pathway more easily.
Yeah, I think of it like a groove. The brain is in a groove. And once you show it a different path, what's outside of the groove, then you're able to get back there again on your own, with or without assistance.
Yes. The expression, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. But the horse is going to remember where the water is when it's thirsty.
Yes, exactly. So what are some of these states that you can use brainwave entrainment to get people into?
Well, it's wonderful, really, because I call it a control knob for your noggin. So We have on the RoXiva over 150 different programs that you can experience, and they range from non-sleep deep relaxation, which is NSDR. NSDR is awesome because you can get into that really slow wave brain waves that are deep sleep waves. And when you're in those brain waves, that is the opportunity that we have to produce human growth hormone. And a lot of people, after you get to a certain age, can't produce human growth hormone anymore. The only time they can do it is in that first sleep cycle of the night, the first hour and a half. And I have, for example, this Aura ring, which tracks my sleep. And even sometimes if I'm not doing the right things, I don't get that much in that first that first hour and a half. And so now that opportunity is lost for that evening. Now, it doesn't mean that you had a crappy night's sleep. It just means you didn't get into the slow wave sleep, because REM sleep is very important. And there's a whole thing around, the reason you may not be getting deep sleep is because you're doing so much REM sleep, because during the REM sleep is when you process your daily stuff. And so if you've got a lot of daily stuff that needs to be processed, that's going to happen first.
I think it was the work of Dr. Joe Dispenza, which you mentioned earlier. He's the one I saw who mentioned that certain brainwave patterns are associated with increased activity of different molecules and substances. Like I think telomerase is associated with theta, a theta dominant brainwave pattern, and human growth hormone, obviously, with delta and probably others as well. But it's cool to see how, like, if you can put your brain in that state, you can help your body perform certain functions better without needing to ingest an exogenous substance.
Oh yeah, and when you go into that that deep slow wave and the human growth hormone is being produced, it's like my ring knows it. Like it asks me, "Were you sleeping?" And then I look at the sleep and it's like it shows me slow waves. I'm like, this is so cool. But on the other side of it, like on the high end of things, on gamma, for example, the right gamma frequencies can trigger the effect of cleaning the brain, where the cerebrospinal fluid, which is always in everywhere in the spinal cord, there's openings in the brain that can open that allow the cerebrospinal fluid to flow up into the brain and clean out all the gunk, like amyloid plaques and all the things that accumulate from our processing. And if we don't get appropriate sleep, where we get into the gamma waves, where those ventricles can open and allow the cerebrospinal fluid to flow, then that really contributes to cognitive decline. And we have science around that now that's showing all of those things are happening.
Gamma is really fascinating. It's my favorite brainwave to enter, to entrain. And I like it from the neurofeedback perspective, to actually train my brain to get there, and then also to induce it via technologies like RoXiva. A lot of my favorite sessions are the gamma dominant sessions.
Yeah. And they're gorgeous. Like visually, I find them gorgeous. They're very spacious and they look like sky or universal kind of like galaxies. And what I guess I should explain for the listeners that one of the main things that happens with these technologies, the stroboscopic light, the RoXiva, is that you have your eyes closed, and despite the fact that your eyes are closed, the blinking patterns through your closed eyelids stimulate your optical system in a way that causes you to see incredible sacred geometry, incredible kaleidoscopic effects, vortices, tunnels, wormholes, wide landscapes. I mean, it's mind-blowing in a good way.
Yeah. And I think you've already described it pretty well, but pretty much the way it works is you lie under the light. It's more than just a light, but the light, and then it plays an audio track that's specially crafted. Perhaps we should talk about how you guys craft them. And the pulsation of the light varies throughout the session, and you close your eyes, you sit there for between, I don't know how short and how long they go, but either between a few minutes and up to like an hour or so. And it takes you into a whole different world.
Yeah. Yeah. So, Yeah, I mean, that was a good explanation as to the way it works. It is a journey, and it can be a journey of deep rest and relaxation, or it can be a journey of shamanic proportions where you're actually going and you're on a quest and you receive a gift and then you bring that back and you integrate it. We've got some guided journeys that work that way. And then we have just some that are like incredible, wild psychedelic rides that reproduce the brainwave patterns of things like psilocybin and ayahuasca and LSD, and create that same neuroplasticity and that same effect of really giving you a neural reset, a central nervous system reset.
One of the things I found really fascinating about this too is that you guys didn't just assume that it's doing this, it's going to mimic because you labeled the track ayahuasca or DMT or whatever it is, but you actually have done some brain mapping like before and maybe during, but after sessions to see this is what happens throughout a journey.
Yeah, and MAPS kind of did a lot of that work too. The Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies, MAPS. They were able to see the signatures of all these compounds, MDMA and ketamine, and the technology exists now to put a cap on somebody and read their thoughts. I mean, we could see the brainwave patterns for people that can see non-physical objects. There's a specific brain that is tuned towards seeing non-corporeal entities. And so it's amazing what we're learning about the brain and the field that it puts out, which gets into a whole different exploration of how does the brain even really work?
Well, I haven't seen any sessions on RoXiva that let me entrain that specific brain type and frequency. Perhaps one day there will be.
Well, there's one called Third Eye Awakening. So that one, it's woo-woo sounding, okay? But there is actually science around how pulsating light over the pineal gland through the eyes can stimulate that part of the brain and contribute to decalcification. So, the whole talk about fluoride in the water and all of that, but it is built into us, so we can actually tune that response and improve
One
it.
of the things I've wondered is changing the brain state and the brain waves, the brain activity to match someone who's on one of these substances, actually inducing a lot of the changes, the neuroplasticity and the clinical outcomes and everything, or is that a byproduct? Like, is this causative or is it just highly correlated with people using these substances? I think it's gonna be hard to answer.
Yeah. I think the substances cause the effect. I mean, because they all have their own signatures. So if I take mushrooms, it's a very different experience from ketamine.
Yeah. But when you take mushrooms, is it the brain state shift that's causing the effects that you notice and the longer term benefits? Or is that a side effect of obviously it's a side effect of taking the mushrooms that your brain state shifts, but is it specifically the brain, the brain activity changing, or is it something else that causes the brain to change that's really eliciting the benefits?
I think that the chemicals in the substances are unique, that they can cross the blood-brain barrier. And so those are the active compounds like DMT, they can cross the blood-brain barrier. And, I don't know the exact science of it. I don't know if it's a neurotoxin or a stimulant, or if there's anything in particular that, I'm sure each one has a different mechanism of action. For example, with marijuana, cannabis, it's the endocannabinoid system and how things just kind of link up and they fit into the receptors. I think that exists for all those other substances as well.
Yeah. But so if you were to take someone who had ingested cannabis, the actual physical substance, or you had put them into a brain state that mirrors that exactly, aside from actually looking at the receptors, would you be able to tell the difference between them in different parts of the body?
I think in the body, you would be able to tell the difference because most of what we're doing is we're trying to duplicate the
Hmm.
brainwave state that occurs with the substances. Like, look, I don't want to duplicate the experience of ayahuasca in the body. I've done it. It ain't pretty. I mean, there's a lot of, releasing orally the other way. And so, it's not pleasant. So, to get that benefit, people
Mm.
they choose to go through the suffering, and if there's a way to get most of the benefit without all of that physical component, then yeah, I'm all for it. Now, ayahuasca is a very unique proposition because I think part of the healing of ayahuasca is that it does create that purging effect, and that purging effect does occur at a cellular level as well. So when we do it just with the brain, the lymphatic system and then the lymphatic system does do some toxin removal. And you should always support that with drinking a lot of water and getting a lot of rest and all of that. But it's just not as severe as when you take the ayahuasca per se. But even mushrooms have a physical kind of payload as well. Like I end up with a little headache after I do mushrooms, or I don't kind of feel myself the next day.
Well, I was also thinking that when you use the physical substance, you're also going to be adding load to your body. It's going to take more time to recover than if you just change the brain state. Of course, the brain also consumes a lot of energy, and like remodeling the brain takes a lot of resources. But when you're also purging and having other unpleasant experiences, or just like the different things that substances do to the physical body, you're just increasing the amount of recovery. And then when you increase the amount of recovery, you can't do it as often. And you're also stuck with the half-life of whatever substance. So you have to dedicate however long the time it takes for you to metabolize and clear it out of your body.
Yeah, 100%. Definitely. And that's no joke. And on top of that, I can add the fear that a lot of people that are in recovery have of creating a relapse type situation, because they feel like that any mind altering chemical is going to cause them to go back into an addictive response. Whether or not that is true for them, it's a valid
Yeah.
concern. And there are some people that, because of their employment, pilots, military people, people in law enforcement, they can't have these chemicals in their body. They're tested for them. So they really don't get to have the benefits of these things unless they can get them another way. And this is one of those ways for that to happen.
Yeah. And then there's also a lot of other related technologies. It seems like no one's done a great job of marrying the best of all the worlds, because I first came across binaural beats a very long time ago, and I was so excited because the names of the tracks were promising, and it seemed like basically digital drugs without a lot of the downsides that you'd associate with using those substances. And when I tried them, it worked great for the first couple times, but then my brain quickly got accustomed to it, it adapted, and they just completely lost all potency after that. And then I came across other technologies like the pink noise, the white noise, the brown noise, isochronic tones. And there's a lot of different ways of using audio to entrain the brain. Tell me more about why you guys chose audio, and also, I mean, light. What was the rationale behind those specifically?
Well, so, the visual cortex and the parts of the brain that are dedicated to vision take up the most real estate in the brain than any other complex. And the eyes are actually part of the brain that's outside of the skull. So they're actually brain cells. I'm going to say this, and I'm sure like it's not going to be received. All right, I'll just say it. So I'll risk getting canceled. If I had the choice to be blind or deaf, I would choose
Mm.
deaf personally, because vision is such an important part of my human experience. Now, there are people that will argue, well, but, and great, that everybody's entitled to their opinion. But for me, I think my life would be a lot harder if I couldn't see than if I couldn't hear. Okay. And the reason I mention that is that we evolved as seeing beings. That's how our brain evolved, really. And that's why so much of our circuitry is dedicated to that. There's the other side of the conversation where people that are a little more into metaphysics or into quantum type thought, where they believe that the brain isn't even generating the consciousness and the world. It's that we're broadcasting it out. We're like just receiving it and broadcasting it out kind of through our eyes. And there's some studies that show that we have more circuits going out of our eyes than coming into the brain. So is it really just a projection? Is everything just a projection of what's happening in our mind? So I kind of lost where I was going. Oh, we were talking about the light. Okay. So yeah, so basically the sound, because our ears are mechanical, and they're just these little hammers that it's amazing. It blows my mind. I mean, hearing is amazing. The fact that we can hear the things that we hear. Uh, I was just looking the other day at an old time record player, with the needle and the grooves. Are like, how did like such beautiful, amazing sound come out of this mechanical setup? Like it just really fascinates me. So sound, yes, is very important, but it is mechanical in nature and it has to be translated for the brain to use it. But light just goes right in and it just stimulates the rods and cones. And that does get translated as well. But again, it's a direct circuit because it's all part of the brain that we're working with. So I think that the effect is just much more powerful visually than it is auditorily. But with new sound technologies like Dolby Atmos and the ability to direct sound spatially, we are creating new combinations of light and sound programs that are truly next level and causing the brain to kind of, what? What just happened there? And really, that's the whole idea of what we're doing at RoXiva is we are trying to create wow experiences of awe and wonder, because what we learned from entrainment is, yes, you can get the brain to a specific state, but what we learned from creating these states of awe and wonder is that we can restore a sense of newness that didn't exist before, a true reset. And that occurs because of the variety of the signals that we're putting in. Certain types of audio, certain types of visual, certain types of isochronic tones, and the vibration feedback, which is introduced through the vibe setup that we have.
But there are also other ways of entraining the brain. Some people use electricity or electromagnetism. Some people will use a different form of light, a different wavelength, like near infrared light. How did you guys settle on those? I guess I'd say two, but really three, because the vibration component also counts.
When you're talking about entrainment, it can be really simple. I mean, you can buy a device that will flicker at 40 hertz, and that's really good for people that are looking to kind of work with their cognitive thing, because it's just that one thing. You can buy devices that flicker at beneficial 10 hertz is a good frequency for red light, for example. That that they use that one a lot. That pulse is found to be beneficial. But those are just simple frequencies that you're delivering. And when you're doing that, that's fine. You can use any number of technologies to do that. But do you have your RoXiva handy?
Yes, I do. It's right here.
So when you hold that up, there's 16 individual light sources there, and 8 of them are cool and 8 of them are warm. So we've got full spectrum light coming out of the RoXiva. So one of the things that we've been learning as an aside is that the RoXiva is very beneficial for people that suffer from seasonal affective disorder because it is full spectrum light. But the what I'm pointing out when I show that there are 16 light sources, which is more than any other device out there, is that we can create the most complex and intricate patterns, which is always introducing novelty. There's one thing the brain notices all the time, and that's what's different, what's new. So you have to be able to introduce novelty. And that's why, with your description earlier of the binaural beats, there's no novelty there. It's just like, you know, it's your brain, you're going to tune that out eventually. But try to tune out a psychedelic journey.
Yeah, a bit harder. And I also noticed when I was using isochronic tones, there was some interesting research and they looked really promising, but the audio tracks suck. They sound completely robotic, mechanical, and they're a total pain to listen to. So I gave up on them simply because of that.
Yeah, and that's why we just drive the lowest isochronic tones through the haptic feedback, through the vibration, so that your body's getting it, but your ears don't get irritated by it.
Exactly. Okay, well, let's go through some of the different sessions. What are the ones that you like and you use, and like what are the things that you find RoXiva customers are enjoying the most, like the uses, benefits, outcomes?
I use the RoXiva at different times of day for different things. I've had it over my bed because we have a program called Silent Night that can put you to sleep. I've done it first thing in the morning. Programs, good morning. You basically we have programs that'll wake you up and get you started in the day, because anybody that follows the science now knows that when we wake up, we should get sunlight in our eyes if at all possible. But if not, if it's a cloudy day or it's too early and the sun's not out yet, the RoXiva is perfect for that, because you're going to get the lux in your eyes and tell your circadian rhythms it's time to be awake. But I mean, I love certainly the psychedelic programs for when I want to shake things up and really get my mind working. We've got programs that are designed around creativity. There's one called Creativity Inspired K. My favorite one for a very long time has been the Khufu Egyptian pharaoh. And that one is one of those journey shamanic type programs that allows for a build up, an intensity, a journey, receiving a gift, and then coming back and integrating that gift. More and more, we're introducing guided sessions because we're finding that folks want to be taken on a journey. We're working with a variety of practitioners that are specialists in the breath work area, in yoga nidra, in non-sleep deep relaxation, so that what we're really trying to do is create a body of work where you can, utilizing the app, which will be out before the end of the year, but it's in beta now, so it is working. Utilizing the app, you can dial in according to how long you'd like to be in your session, what the feeling tone of the session is that you're looking for, specific frequencies that you'd like to focus on, a result that you're looking for. So really everything's on the table. When I said earlier that it's like having the control knob on your noggin, it's true. If I want to be in alpha flow state like Tiger Woods, I can get there. Like, I can do it. I can bring myself there. If I've got a big project that I need to work on and I need to get into a totally focused state, we have a program called Attention Booster that'll just put me right in there. And so with 150 out there, it would take a long time to go through, but suffice to say that we can fit a program into just about any result you're looking for.
Yeah. One thing I learned from last time we spoke is that this has some unique and distinct advantages over neurofeedback. Can you explain some of the reasons you like using stroboscopic light for brainwave entrainment over neurofeedback?
Yeah, I mean, I think I touched on it earlier, but I'll restate that because of the potency of the signals that we put out. I mean, we are the most powerful stroboscopic light device out there, period. There's just nobody stronger, and there's nobody that's putting out as much content as we are. So that we're always providing new stimulus, new types of experiences. And going back to that novelty situation, when you're looking to create a situation where there's, you say you've got somebody that's in fight or flight, PTSD or trauma response, whatever, you want to break that pattern. You want to take them out of wherever they are. And neurofeedback can do that if you can get the person to sit still long enough to receive enough sessions to get the benefit. But entrainment, specifically entrainment with the RoXiva, it's such a wow experience that they're getting entertained into feeling better.
That's exactly how I was going to describe it, because I do neurofeedback all the time, and most of the time it really feels like brain training, like the bicep curl for the brain, where it feels good when you finish, but then I don't necessarily look forward to sitting down and doing neurofeedback, especially for longer periods of time. But with the RoXiva, I just sit back, relax, and enjoy the wild ride and enjoy the same or very similar outcome.
Yeah, let me turn it back to you then and ask you a question. Pick one of those sessions that you've experienced and you came out of it. How did you feel?
When I did the DMT session, I felt shaken up and very surprised that a light could have that profound of an impact. I also found myself during certain sessions, like not quite hyperventilating, but like feeling tension in my chest. And then I controlled my breathing. I breathed through it. And yeah, I was just blown away that a light could do that. And I'd be really curious to see how my vitals change based on the different sessions, like my heart rate variability, my respiratory rate, all those types of things.
Yeah, and I want to point out you made a very good statement there that the DMT programs are among the strongest that we have. And so they're not for beginners. Okay. And you're not a beginner. So, but let me tell you, there's a ton of programs on the RoXiva that are very chill, that are like beautiful and peaceful and like, but yeah, what you just described is exactly what I go for a lot of the time because I want those benefits of shaking the snow globe, shaking the etch a sketch. Like let's do a reset, let's let go of this garbage that we're carrying around. And that's the one thing people say, that they say it almost exactly the way you said it. Like, I felt like it was a lot, but then I just surrendered into it and I never felt so relaxed and peaceful in my life. So it really is that surrender component that we're working towards. We're trying to raise that threshold of what we can tolerate by being able to surrender sooner. And isn't that a beautiful metaphor for life, right? Surrender sooner. Not give up, not lay down, surrender and accept that what is, and that allows you to make the next move. Because if you resist, you can't effectively deal with what's happening.
This would also be a really good entry point into meditation for people, because you're not passive. You're laying there underneath the light and closing your eyes and going through the journey. You're conscious through the whole thing, or at least some degree of conscious. And it also seems like it could be a good way to build up to meditation if you want to do that outside of it, because then all of a sudden you're able to stay awake the whole time. And yeah, it seems like it would pair nicely.
Yeah. I call it training wheels for meditation because we've got some programs. We've got a series of programs called Meditate Away, and they basically take you into deeper and deeper levels of meditation sequentially. There are 3 of them. And we're actually working on a new series that'll do more of that. But it really does help to be able to give the mind something to work on while you're trying to learn to meditate. Because I can't think of the name of the organization. It's affiliated with Brown University, which is near me. It's an organization that supports people that have had negative reactions from meditation.
Wow.
And there's more and more studies and work and information coming out that certain types of meditation for the wrong type of people can be very negative. And we just kind of try a meditation here and there and hope it's the right one for us. I work with a company called the Neuromeditation Institute. They're in Washington State, and they've developed 4 different kinds of meditation that you can learn that basically fit most of the personality types. And that makes sense to me. You take a questionnaire, you get a baseline of where you are, and then you figure out which type of meditation you want to explore based on where you scored highest. Because if somebody's got really, really high anxiety, asking them to sit there and observe their thoughts is just crazy. I mean, if somebody is angry and antisocial, they may not be so good at loving kindness meditation right out of the gate, So really, meditation's a giant word, and it's a giant field. We're in some ways providing meditative states, absolutely. But we're also, we're providing journeys, and we're also providing hypnagogic states which border on hypnosis. And we do actually have programs that are hypnosis type programs on the RoXiva. And one of the things that I've been doing with some of my more advanced users is teaching them how to create your own soundtrack and pair it with a light session and basically install your own behaviors into your own subconscious, do your own programming in your own voice.
Wow. I want to double click into that because I guess it was last year, I learned one technique to reprogram the subconscious. And basically you take the story and it's a long, complicated process, but you kind of need to have 2 people for it, because one person is speaking certain words into one ear of the person and the other person is speaking other words, and the brain can only pick up on one dialogue at a time and the other words slip into the subconscious. So it sounds like this would be the perfect tool to get those stories and build them into a track.
You could record that way too. You could record 2 different stories in stereo, and then only activate the left channel for one and the right channel for the other. As a matter of fact, there's a company in, I think they're in Minnesota, called Learning Strategies. And they produce a product called Paraliminals. And the guy, Paul Sheely, that started this technology does exactly that. He tells 2 different stories, and one is going in through your right headphone, one is going in through your left ear. And you only get pieces of them, but your brain is doing so much exercise trying to figure out what's being said that it goes into that state of total receptiveness, and the suggestions go really deep. As a matter of fact, we have a RoXiva at Learning Strategies Corporation, and they're working with it, and we're going to be putting an eye on putting together some content with them so that there's light sessions that have the paraliminals going in the background as well, much the same as we've done with the Monroe Institute.
That's really cool too, because the subconscious can be a hard thing to shift and to reprogram. And with customized content, specifically around the stories that we want to adapt, that's like a great use case.
That is something that a lot of hypnotherapists are using our device for, a lot of psychotherapists, because we can really put people into a state of complete receptivity and have them design and install suggestions or behaviors that they want to see in their lives, or cessation of certain behaviors.
So how does the hypnotherapy work if we do not record custom tracks? I haven't done any of the sessions on the RoXiva that are hypnotherapy. What's going on with those?
Well, I mean, you can record, you can find affirmations anywhere. So if you wanted to, you could just run one of our hypnosis sessions without the audio track and just have the light going and then listen to affirmations or something that you want to focus on. So it's totally possible. On YouTube, you can find anything now. 30 minutes of money affirmations, it's
Yeah,
out
but how
there.
is it working? Because as I understand it, the reticular activating system generally filters out that kind of information, such as affirmations, because it doubts the validity of them based on the subconscious. So with your hypnosis sessions, how are you getting that information to the subconscious?
Well, I mean, you want to choose affirmations that are positive and not in conflict with what exists now. So I can make money. I can, not I am rich, because, I'm not rich right now. So, I mean, again, that dissonance, absolutely. You can't lie to yourself and expect your system to just take it. There has to be that pathway. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to install pathways to where you want to be. I wake up and have a healthy morning routine. I eat healthy foods. I don't allow toxic substances into my body. Basically the things you want to do. Or, cigarettes no longer serve me, whatever. I mean, it is a process of finding the appropriate, just like anything. Isn't that like anything in life, though? Aren't we always just trying to discern what the best inputs are when we're aware of it?
Well, I'm gonna have to try that. I haven't done the hypnosis sessions, so looking forward to experimenting there. Are there any common things you see people using with RoXiva or stroboscopic light and audio and vibration therapies to enhance the effects or to just get more out of their journeys?
I mean, we've got all kinds of things now. We've got people using PEMF mats. We've got people using red light mats. We've got people using aromatherapy, breath work, definitely. People are doing breath work. People are using devices like the pulsetto, which is the thing you put on
Vagus
your
nerve
neck,
stimulator.
or I think this, you put it on your chest. There's devices that can clip onto your ears. TENS type devices. So, really, as long as you're not interfering with the visual path of the light coming into your eyes, and you could pretty much stack anything with it, except neurofeedback. You don't want to do neurofeedback and RoXiva at the same
Yeah.
time. Right after you can, for integrating, you could do neurofeedback.
I'm glad you mentioned integrating because I'm also curious, like with psychedelics specifically, there's the period after where it's thought to reopen the critical window where you're able to absorb and assimilate new information, make changes, and then you want to integrate during that period and I guess reflect and make the changes. How does this compare? Do you need to do anything after a session or can you just go immediately about your day?
Well, I like to lie there for a minute or two and just let it percolate, and then just get up slowly and just be intentional. And, if you can't, if something calls to you that you have to deal with or whatever, it doesn't negate the benefits of what happened. But yes, ideally, you want to create a space of time for yourself, depending upon how long the session you want to do, where you've got a little bit of time before to set your intentions for the session, and then a little time after to integrate. And we are working on tools such as a journaling tool so that you can spend that time afterwards.
Because I could see if every time the second it ended, you jumped up and ran off and got immediately into a stressful situation, your body could see a pattern, form a pattern between this session and the second it ends being thrust headfirst into stress. And you probably wouldn't want that.
Yeah, I mean, you're in a highly neuroplastic state. So whatever follows could get encoded.
So it's a good idea afterward to make beneficial stimulus follow.
Yeah, a little self-love, make a cup of tea, just sit.
What about something like reading or learning? Is that going to be a good time right after a session when you're in a more neuroplastic state?
Yeah, so we've got programs that put you into a heightened learning state. So there are sessions that you can do, and then your brain is going to be ready to receive information. And so students that really want to turbocharge their studying, or anybody that really wants to remember something really well, yes, it's a wonderful primer.
Okay, and if people want to explore this type of thing on their own before upgrading to a RoXiva, because they tend to be a little pricier and they're great for coaches, consultants, wellness clinic owners, all that type of stuff, how do you recommend they explore this world to see if it's going to be a good fit for them?
So if you go to our website, you can use the contact us form and request to be paired up with a practitioner in your area. And we do that gladly and get a session and experience what it's like. There are some consumer devices out there that do simpler entrainment and a little bit of brain exercise work. They're not bad, they're good devices. They're just not doing what we do in terms of the scope and the depth and the power of the content that we're putting out. I mean, we're the only device out there that has really long form, journeys, like up to an hour, 2 hours long, where you can travel and, especially. So you make a very good point. All right. If you do one of these other kind of devices that don't have the longer form content and aren't designed for the full journey, you can come out of it and then be in a state that you don't really want to be in if something negative happens. But if you do one of our longer form journeys, there's an arc to it. So we build you up, and then take you through and then drop down and then build you up a little higher. And then eventually we bring you back to where you were, so that if you don't have the time to integrate, the integration was part of the session.
I like that. I've actually used
Yeah.
and have some other devices that don't necessarily bring you back down to baseline, and sometimes they just
Yeah.
abruptly end or cut off, and
Yes.
it feels like
Yes.
just being shaken.
Yeah. A lot of those devices do that. They just end abruptly.
Okay, and I have a couple other questions for you. Things we talked about in a previous conversation that might be interesting to cover briefly. What's the role of the glia in the brain, and how does that relate to religion?
Religion. Wow. Whew. Wow. Okay. So I'm going to take this in a couple of pieces. I'll talk about the glial cells and what they do, and how they work, and then I'll see if I can relate it to religion somehow. So the glia is kind of like a film. It's like cells that coat all of the outside of your brain, in between the brain and the skull, and it's kind of like the fascia on your muscles. So it kind of gives the structure to, if you didn't have fascia on your arms, then your muscles would all be loose and like protruding against your skin. So it gives structure so that there can be structure. And the glia does the same thing. It kind of creates a net around the brain. But at the same time, it also is a conductive type material, so that it creates a field around the brain. Now that field is what we read when we put somebody in an MRI, or when we put a sensor on the scalp, because we don't really know if the potential of a neurofeedback sensor is reading is actually what's, right there in the brain at that time, or if it's a residual of something that happened deep in the brain that just kind of wiggled its way out through all the layers. All right. So what happens is, and I mentioned earlier that you can actually read thoughts of people by putting the right apparatus on, is that it's transmitting, and it's transmitting like your aura, basically. It's a field that comes out of your head. And now I know why you asked about religion. So back in olden times, when somebody was really pure of mind and thought and spirit and soul, they were depicted with a halo around their head, which meant that the field that their brain was putting out was white. It was pure. It was golden. And so there was a sense of pristine kind of purity. And that is what they're able to see now on people that have done the work, these Tibetan monks that do, 40 years of Zen. They have that field that, like, wow. And that's why gamma is so beautiful.
Ah.
Gamma is that connection to source frequency.
And the experience I feel when I enter gamma is a like relaxed alertness. I think I've heard it described as, and to me, it's like the flow state, and it feels like a different perspective in a way. It's really hard to describe what gamma feels like.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's beautiful. It really is. I love gamma.
Okay. I also want to ask you about something you mentioned that seemed fascinating and probably could be a whole nother podcast. And that is, what is holonomic brain theory?
Right. So Dr. Carl Pribram has been, well, he passed, but he was one of the primary researchers in holonomic brain theory. And actually, I can also reference Dr. Rupert Sheldrake, who actually is a proponent of the morphogenic field. And so they're kind of related, morphogenic fields and holonomic brain theory, because the idea is that there is a perfect, and actually Plato alluded to this in the forms. Like, there is such a thing as chairness. And then every chair on the planet is an expression of chairness in lesser or greater degree. And some are closer to that perfect ideal. Okay. And so with holonomic brain theory and the morphogenic field, what we're expressing in the world is Nickness or Raphaelness, that ideal blueprint for what is what we're supposed to be. And it's all of those sins of nature and nurture that prevent us from expressing that fully, whether they be epigenetic or environmental. And so if you just look at the being as being the being, and my consciousness is created in my brain simply by the fact that I have a brain, and when I flatline, that's it, lights out, nothing anymore, then that's kind of a, almost like atheism, like a nihilistic kind of way of approaching things, where if you feel that there is a soul, perhaps, whatever you choose to call it, or a higher self, then that is coming through and being received by the brain in some way and manifested through the brain. Okay. And so holonomic brain theory states that nothing specifically lives anywhere in the brain. Like there is not like a spot, like with coordinates in my brain, that if I found the coordinates, that I could find the memory of my falling down the stairs when I was a little kid and erase it. Okay. There was a movie out once where I forgot the name of it, but it was a really good movie. And like, it was a couple that tried to have each other erased from their brains after they broke up. And I can't remember the name, but it was a really good one. And maybe you can drop it in the notes later. But basically, it was they decided that they didn't want to do it after all. They wanted to preserve their memories, and so they resisted. And they found like places they could go and hide in each other's minds and still find each other. And like, I think of that the same way, that really we are all everything, and we're a holistic system, that our mind is actually not just our brains, but our brains and our bodies. And that's why we're finding now brain cells in the heart and brain cells in the gut. Why do they need to be there if the brain's doing all the heavy lifting? So I believe holonomic brain theory states that we're a holistic organism. We are designed to work in totality. And that, yes, science can dissect and do pieces, parts, and look at, different parts and say, this might be happening here, but nobody knows exactly what's going on, which is why they call it the hard problem of consciousness.
Yes.
We still don't know what consciousness is.
Or where it lives.
And or where it lives. And so that's why we're trying to explore it. And I personally like the idea better that my consciousness is driving around in this Raphael car right now, and that when this vehicle gets too old to be serviceable, that consciousness will go somewhere else.
Well, that's a good way to wrap this one up, Raphael. If people want to try RoXiva, you mentioned they can find a practitioner near them. You also have your website, roxiva.com. And I don't know if you guys are active on social media.
Yeah, we have a Facebook page, RoXiva. We have Instagram, which is roxiva.innovations. And let's see, if you type in RoXiva, I think the .innovations will populate itself. So we're going to be doing more. We don't do much on TikTok. We do a little bit, but keep your eyes open. There's a lot of good stuff coming, and we're excited to help people really discover the possibilities and capabilities of their minds, their brains, and their spirit.
Nice. And I have reviewed RoXiva RX1 Light that I have right here. So you guys can find that in the show notes for this episode. There's an article. I'll probably create a video on it at some point. But Raf, thank you for joining the podcast. It's been a pleasure hosting you today.
It was wonderful. Thank you for having me, Nick.
I hope that this has been helpful for you. If you enjoyed it, subscribe and hit the thumbs up. I love knowing who's in the 1% committed to reaching their full potential. Comment 1% below so that I know who you are. For all the resources and links, meet me on my website at mindbodypeak.com. I appreciate you and look forward to connecting with you. As a reminder, the information depicted in this video is for information purposes only. Please consult your primary healthcare professional before making any lifestyle changes.